Welcome to the Planning Regulatory Licence Committee of Wednesday the 2nd of March. Before we start the agenda, Geraint Morgan will now read out the item there about the recording of the meeting.
Right. This meeting of the Planning Regulatory and Licensing Committee will be recorded for subsequent broadcast via the authority's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. At the start of the meeting, the Chair will confirm if all or part of the meeting is being recorded, and the public seating areas will be in view of the camera, and by entering the chamber and using the public seating area, members of the public are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings as outlined above.
Thank you. Now go to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have Councillor Howard Barrett, Councillor Leighton Smart and Councillor Simon Williams.
Any other apologies for absence? No? If not, we go on to item 2, and that's the declarations of interest, taking into account A and B on the agenda. Any declaration of interest? No? Okay. We now go to the open session and the planning applications. And the third item on the agenda is P/15/0369, the former Old Mount Pleasant School, Cardiff Road, Merthyr Vale, Merthyr Tydfil. And that's to consider report of the Corporate Director, Place and Transformation. It's pages 1 to 8. And David Cross is going to take us through this report. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this application relates to the former Mount Pleasant School, which was closed back in 2010 and has since been vacant for a number of years. The building itself is located within a residential area with playing fields to the south of the site and the Taff Trail and the railway line located to the west of the site. Full planning permission is now being sought for the change of use of that school building to a bunkhouse, which would provide rooms for a total of 34 beds with communal facilities and staff accommodation. It's intended that the bunkhouse itself will provide accommodation to support recreational activities and tourism in the area. The applicant has suggested it would be used, or they would look to attract bikers going to the Bike Park Wales, users of the Taff Trail and potentially those visiting Brecon Beacons. The building itself is not to be used for any other temporary form of accommodation, and the proposal also includes the creation of a new vehicle access into the site with a total of 13 off-street parking spaces. As a result of the consultation exercise, no objection was raised. However, following the publicity exercise, a petition was received with a total of 152 signatures. The main issues raised in the petition relate to the highway safety concerns as a result of any additional traffic in the area and to children who play in the vicinity. Concerns were also raised in relation to the commercial use of the building and its use as a bunkhouse and whether there's a need for more bunkhouses in the borough. Additionally, it's acknowledged that Councillor Mansbridge requested the application be determined by the Planning Committee so that the consideration to the access and the highway safety implications can be of the development can be considered. The merits of the application are set out in more detail in the planning consideration section of the report. To summarise some of the key issues, should be noted that the former school building is considered to be a prominent and attractive property that has a positive contribution to the character of the area. The building has been vacant for a number of years, and the proposed development would enable it to be brought back into beneficial use. In this regard, the Economic Development and Tourism Manager has indicated that the proposed bunkhouse would complement the existing tourism sector and support the Council's vision for promoting and encouraging tourism. In terms of the highway safety implications, the development would be providing vehicular access into the site together with the creation of off-street parking and turning facilities. Pardon me. It is considered that the traffic generated by the proposal would not differ significantly from its original use as a school, which at that time would have necessitated a greater amount of on-street parking, which was with no turning facilities provided in adjacent to the site. Taking all matters into consideration, the proposed development is considered to be acceptable and complies with the relevant LDP policies, and therefore it is recommended that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set up in pages 7 and 8.
Thank you. Before I invite any questions, Councillor Goldsworthy obviously will be able to take part in this item. Okay. Any questions? Councillor Mansmead? Any questions from members? No? Right, comments. Councillor Mansmead?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have concerns when we first knew that the school was going to be converted into a bunkhouse. For that reason, that's why I wanted to bring it to council rather than be delegate, because I think the residents of Merthyr Vale do need their say in this matter. I mean, you've had the number 152 objections. My own objection in the very beginning was the turning into the building itself, because the road leading down to it is very steep, and I did have concerns of a vehicle entering or a vehicle leaving. I still got concerns, even though you've pointed out the gates have been widened. You are going to have walkers, people with bikes, so vehicles going down that slope and doing a U-turn to go into the car park in the front of the school could be a cause of concern. I'm glad to note that you've put the sentence on page 2. The building is not to be used for any temporary form of accommodation. This is another concern of the residents down there. If the bunkhouse fails, that the building won't be used then for accommodation of people from outside who are rehoused there on a temporary basis for rehousing in the borough. I think you can get the gist of what I'm trying to say without being over the top. Is that assurance will be given to us down the bottom end of the borough?
Well, if the building is used for anything other than a bunkhouse, then we'll obviously have to take a view as to how it's being used and determine whether there's a material change. The actual bunkhouse itself would be a sui generis use, so if it's falling into another class or another sui generis use, it would need separate planning permission for that.
Any other comments from members? No. If not, I require a member to move the approval on 1 to 2nd.
I'd like to move the application, Chair.
And that's been seconded by Councillor Alan Jones. Next item on the agenda is item 4, that's P/15/0433. It's land to the rear south of numbers 9 to 15 Newton Street, Abercanid, and that's to consider report of the corporate director, and it's pages 9 to 18. And again, it's David Cross who's going to take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this application relates to an area of land measuring approximately 0.2 hectares, which is situated on the edge of the settlement boundary to the rear of Newton Street. The site itself is characterised as an area of vacant grassland with a fair bit of overgrown vegetation along its boundaries. The site is also designated as a site of importance for nature conservation as well. Planning permission is being sought for the erection of a detached dwelling, which will also have ancillary barn, shed and car shelter, with a new driveway constructed that links to the Taff Trail. The proposed dwelling would be constructed using sustainable methods such as straw bale walls with timber cladding a green roof consisting of various grass species. The dwelling itself would also be constructed on timber posts due to the sloping nature of the site, which is a measure to minimise the impact the development itself has on the ground. As a result of the consultation exercise, no objection was received. However, following the publicity exercise, a total of 5 letters of objection were submitted. A summary of the main issues are set out on page 11 of the report, and it's noted that Councillor Lewis has requested the application be presented to the Planning Committee to consider those concerns of the local residents. It should be noted that since this report was written, a further letter of objection has been received, which reiterates some of the concerns previously raised in terms of the potential impact of additional traffic along the Taff Trail and the access into the site, as well as concerns with the potential impact on gas and water supply which runs underneath the Taff Trail. Additionally, a letter of support has also been submitted, which considers the proposal to be an exemplar scheme demonstrating a clear and sensitive approach to the building design and context of the site. It should be noted that revised plans were submitted to address some of the concerns initially raised by the residents, in particular to the proposed barn, which I should clarify is to be used as a workshop. The residents at that time thought it may be used to accommodate animals. The barn itself has been repositioned further away from the Taff Trail and further away from the rear gardens of Newton Street. So as such, it's considered that the concerns in relation to the barn have been addressed. In terms of the potential impact to the development on the Taff Trail, it should be noted that there is an existing access already into the site, and that the section of the Taff Trail leading to the site is already used to provide vehicular access to a number of residential properties in the vicinity. In this regard, it should be noted that both the engineering and highway manager have not raised any objections, and the rights-of-way officers. As such, there's no concerns being raised in terms of the highway safety. Taking all matters into consideration, the proposed development is deemed to be acceptable and complies with the relevant LDB policies, and is therefore recommended that the application be granted permission subject to the conditions set out on pages 15 to 17 of the report.
Thank you, David. Questions? Councillor Lewis and then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Chair. This area of the Taff Trail is extremely popular with joggers, dog walkers, cyclists, etc. Indeed, the footfall in that vicinity has increased markedly since the bike park was opened a couple of years ago. What sort of access considerations have you looked at to ensure the safety of those using the Taff Trail is not compromised?
Well, as I mentioned, there's already an existing access to the site, which the land itself is owned by Welsh Water, who's obviously granted permission to the developer initially for that access. The visibility from that point in both directions is felt to be suitable, so any cyclists or pedestrians using that would both be able to see traffic coming out to the site, which will generally be quite small amount because it's only serving one property, and also the drivers will be able to see people coming in and out of the site. The access itself is actually quite close to the main crossover, which is further up, leading on, which links on to Newton Street. And so people approaching that area are already going to be aware of that intersection where there's going to be vehicular traffic. So I feel that in that respect, the impact is quite small.
Thank you for that. Visibility has been highlighted as a concern. Very close to the entrance is quite a steep downhill slope, and also the passage isn't quite straight. There's an obstructive line of sight there. Has that been taken into consideration?
You referring to the driveway itself, or the? Well, okay. So, well, the junction of the access is on the outer edge of the bend, so there is. And there's a certain amount of verge there where vehicles can sort of encroach out of the site without impeding the traffic, so they can get good visibility in both directions. There's also, I should point out, there's also a turning facility within the site as well. So if there is a need for, well, it basically provides the opportunity for vehicles to drive in, turn around, so there wouldn't be a need for reversing movements onto the trail either.
Okay, thank you, David. Can you confirm that the barn is not going to be used for livestock and other animals?
Yes.
Got a couple of further questions, if that's okay, Chair. Okay. One of the objections indicated that there was a covenant involved on the site. Have the council looked into that matter?
Well, there's no planning restriction which prevents the development of the site for residential purposes, and any covenants on the land deeds, for instance, would be a matter for the landowners to address. It's not a planning matter.
Would that be held within the title deeds of the land? Thank you. While the site is being built, it's quite narrow access there, so there's going to be limited access to any sort of heavy goods, vehicles, etc. Has that been taken into consideration, please?
When I spoke to the highway engineers, I sort of raised the question about whether the access leading up to site is suitable, and they indicate, because obviously part of the initial approach goes over a little bridge where you've got the water course, and I know one of the concerns raised early on was whether that was able to accommodate any heavy goods vehicles, and the engineers were of the view that the ground is stable enough to allow for access. And obviously once the site itself is quite a big site, so any sort of vehicles or materials that might sort of be associated with the development could be stored, so that it would allow for the Taff Trail to remain free all the time.
Okay, thank you, David. I can appreciate that Wales and West Utilities and Welsh Water have come back and said there's no issues with that particular site. There are gas pipes and water mains in the area, and indeed the surrounding area is owned by Welsh Water. What sort of consideration has the planning department taken into account with regards to the gas mains and water mains?
In terms of the gas mains, Wales and West have commented on the application. They provide a plan which indicates where their utilities are anticipated to be. There's nothing that leads towards the application site, either through it or adjacent to it. The plans provided show actually a gas main going from Newton Street across to the small group of houses on the other side of the Taff. It doesn't come south of the Taff Trail. In terms of Welsh Water, they've obviously commented on the application. They've not raised any objections. So usually if there is a potential impact on any water mains, then they would set out sort of buffers or parameters where you can't develop within a certain range of those drains. I think one of the objectors, when I spoke to them when they came to visit our office, alluded to the fact that they may be privately owned drains, in which case if there is any damage to those or they're affected during the course of the development, that would be a matter that needs to be resolved between the landowner, the private landowners.
One further question, please. It relates to the publicity exercise. How, within the vicinity of the site, how close do they have to be in order to contact residents?
Sorry, what do you mean by contact residents?
A number of residents were contacted in relation to the planning application. How close do those residents have to be in order to be contacted?
In terms of the consultation, we will send letters to the property owners which abut the site. In this particular case, the letters were sent to those that along Newton Street, because they are obviously directly behind it, even though there's an intervening stream. But in addition to that, site notices were placed along the Taff Trail and Newton Street to make people in the wider area aware of the development.
Okay, thank you very much. Chair, on the basis of the objections raised, can I please ask for a site meeting?
Can, but what are the reasons for the site meeting?
There's a significant number of objections. The objections stated are not one particular reason. There's a number of reasons for those objections, and I think it's prudent for us to investigate the matter more. Can I finish, please? I think it's prudent for us to investigate the matter more by requesting a site meeting so all of us can see, and also the officers.
Can I just hold up a second, because Councillor Chaplin indicated you wanted to ask a question. Could you ask a question?
Yes, it is in respect of the proposed dwelling. How many bedrooms?
Three bedrooms.
The use of straw bales, am I correct in assuming that is for insulation purposes? Okay. And due to the sloping nature of the site, the dwelling would be supported above ground by timber posts?
As I understand it, the applicants are sort of environmentally friendly aware, and I know they've been working quite closely with our countryside officer, because obviously the site itself is designated as a site of importance for ecological value. As part of that, they set out various measures to minimise the effect of the development on that sink, and one of those was to raise it off the ground so you don't need to put large foundations, and obviously as well on top of that, it because of the sloping nature, it allows for part of the site will be rested on the ground, but whereas the other part will be supported on timber posts, which require obviously a smaller foundation then.
Is the site within a former mining area?
That didn't come up on our maps now.
I have a couple more if I could, Chair. It's in relation to the proposed barn. We've been told it won't be used for animals. What is it going to be used for then?
This was something that was raised early on with the applicant, and they've indicated that they want to use it as a workshop, because part of their ambitions is to manage the sites through hedge laying and things like that, and I understand that they're looking to do some of the works to the property themselves, so it gives them a facility to do that.
And quite separately, there's going to be a carport then. Okay.
Okay. Just, are there any other questions from any of the members at this stage? No. Right, it's been moved by.
It's been requested.
Well, I think you. Did you say that you were moving it?
No, Chair, I request a site meeting.
Well, it does need to be moved if we're going to ask for a site meeting. Are you moving it? Right. It's been moved. Is there a seconder to that?
Second this particular request, Chair, on the grounds that as a cyclist, and I've used that area of the Tap Trail in the past, I'd like to see for myself what impact this may have on future tourism in the area.
Is that the only reason that a site visit is being requested? I mean, you said to me that there were a number of objections. Some of those were not material planning considerations, as Mr. Cross explained to you. So which particular aspects of the objections do you want to consider on site?
This is also an ecological area. Therefore, I think it's cautious for us to inspect the ecological implications that this planning application will have. It's also a significant tourist area, as my colleague Councillor Goldsworthy just indicated.
So the reason for the site visit is ecological and tourism. Anything else, Councillor Lewis?
Amongst others, there are, as I said, objections, notably access to and from the site.
You've said there are a number of objections. They're listed on page 11, and the bullet points are given for those objections. Which ones do you want to consider on site?
For example, the development could rise to overlooking and overshadowing concerns. You know, it's stated there, it's in each bullet point. I've given you reasons. Are they not enough?
But they're not enough, Councillor Lewis. There is a code of conduct, and the code of conduct requires the reasons to be given and the issues that need to be discussed on site. And all I'm asking you to do is to give me the issues that you would like to discuss on site. No more.
Thank you, Geraint. Amongst the two that I've already provided, we are concerned about heavy goods vehicles. There's also concern that it is indeed a heritage site, so we are concerned about the impact on that. Utilities in the area. Would you like me to continue?
Right. Yeah, thank you for that. It's been moved and seconded to request a site meeting. Ready to vote?
Something before that, Chair.
Is this a
Kind of an amendment, really. I think the questions raised by Councillor Lewis have been adequately covered by the officers in his replies, and I don't see what how a site meeting would benefit.
No,
Well-
and you have the opportunity to vote against.
it's against, so that is carried.
Do they want?
Yes. Which officers do you want to attend there, Councillor Lewis, please?
Rights of way, please. Highways. Tourism officer. Environmental health, if possible. Countryside. There's no possibility of outside agencies. No. Okay.
So that's four, isn't it? Four officers.
Well, that's 5.
Five.
What about the heritage officer?
Right, thank you. I'll go back to the agenda. Item 5, information reports. It's purely there for information. There's a delegated decision report list. And any other business, number 6, I have none. And can I thank you all for your attendance and declare the meeting of this planning committee closed.